Ryan.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. This bill is about good governance. As times change, many issues of governance change with those times. Rules and regulations become obsolete, and the coalition government is taking steps to ensure business and the Australian people are not weighed down with needless imposition by government into their lives. Not only that, Mr Deputy Speaker, but rescinding these unnecessary measures saves money for the government and business. This means the coalition government can once again proceed to pull Australia out of the deficit, disaster and financial mire in which we are left well and truly bogged by Labor, and ensure business has more time and more money with which to employ Australians. Interestingly, I had the pleasure of talking on Steve Austin's Radio 612 ABC Brisbane last week with the member for Oxley. He commented, just like the previous speaker, the member for Moreton, that these repeal bills were nothing special, and he considered to be just a part of governing. He also said that while in power, Labor had repealed thousands of pieces of redundant legislation, but had done so without fanfare. Well, of course, Mr Deputy Speaker, that could be because at the end of the day they had a net increase of 21,000 extra pieces of legislation. And the member for Moreton called it a politician's day off and that they had done everything without fanfare. And yet the then Prime Minister Rudd, of course, had a red tape website which, with his smiling face, you could apply to get a fact sheet about red tape, so perhaps not as little fanfare as the member for Moreton thought. I also find it hard to believe because the previous Rudd-Gillard-Rudd governments turned up to the opening of an envelope if it got the media coverage, and even organised media events that never occurred, such as when they published glossy brochures announcing that they had actually delivered a surplus, when of course they never did. And lastly and most significantly, these repeal days actually save money, and we know that those opposite know nothing about saving money. If what the member for Oxley said was true, then why is it necessary for this government to abolish the Fishing Industry Policy Council? Formed in 1991 by the last true Labor leader Bob Hawke, it has met precisely 0 times since its creation 23 years ago. Why is it necessary for us, the Coalition, to repeal the Papua New Guinea Loan International Bank Act 1970 when the loan it refers to was finalised and paid back when Keating was Prime Minister 20 years ago? Though perhaps, Mr Deputy Speaker, we should leave that Act in place as a reminder to those opposite that loans do need to be repaid. Since, according to the member for Oxley, if no one else, Labor are so good at cleaning up, why are Australians of all ages, from those born today to those passing today, $15,000 each indebted to the former Labor Greens Alliance government? A child born right now, this very minute, is in debt because of the reckless inability of Labor and the Green henchmen to stop burning a hole in the national credit card. We've heard a lot in this place since the passing of Gough Whitlam about legacy. Well, Mr Deputy Speaker, that is the legacy of the last Labor rotation behind the wheel, the car that crashed sideways into a tree because too many people were trying to drive our economy and were whisked away from the scene of the crime to be placed on life support. Those opposite drone on endlessly about rising costs, about students maybe having to pay extra for their education. Of course, that would not even be an issue if mum, dad and 2 children did not have a $60,000 millstone around their necks, courtesy of the best treasurer in the world. Perhaps we need an omnibus edition of a new bill, one that garnishes the member for Lily's parliamentary salary to pay back the Australian taxpayer for his hubris. I would dub the member for Lily the Icarus of economics, but Icarus at least made it off the ground. The Coalition government has realised more than $2 billion in savings in just 2 repeal days, more than double our savings target, and enough money to build hospitals, to build schools, to give a pension increase, or to help pay off a tiny fraction of the economic chasm left by those opposite. Frankly, Mr Deputy Speaker, listening to the other side of the chamber, attempting to blame shift is becoming as trite and transparent as the Emperor's new clothes. Mr Deputy Speaker, the Coalition government would prefer to spend money on those things that enhance the lives and experience of Australians, yet we remain hobbled to a debt not of our making. Despite the economic shambles we inherited, the Coalition is governing for all Australians, not just the vested interests of Labor and its union puppeteers. I urge those opposite to remove the arm from the back of their shirts and support this bill for the good of Australia, to free up business to spend more time on creating wealth and jobs and to save government a significant amount of money. I congratulate the member for Kooyong on this bill, which makes significant savings in time and money and in turn will boost productivity as a result. I commend this bill to the House.